NASCAR's first African-American winner, Wendell Scott. Wendell Scott was a former NASCAR Grand National Series, now NASCAR Cup Series, and Sportsman Series driver who competed from 1951 through 1973, always running out of his own pocket, never having any commercial sponsorship. Scott wasn't just up against racing on a low budget. This was an African-American breaking into and racing consistently in a series that was centered in a rather racist Southeast of the 1950s and 60s. It took so much courage and determination. Scott was not going to let the color of his skin dictate if he was going to race in NASCAR. A World War II veteran, once returning from the war, he began running moonshine and competing in regional stock car races. In 1951, the Dixie Circuit, a regional racing organization, made the decision to recruit a black driver as a form of marketing gimmick. Scott was recruited for this, participating in his first race at the Danbury Speedway. However, he did not stop there. In search of more racing opportunities, with the assistance of Hiram Kincaid, a mechanic who was also African American, Scott repaired his race car, towing it to a NASCAR sanctioned event held at Bowman Gray Stadium. Once he arrived at the track, officials did not let him compete due to his race. After a few more days had passed, Scott showed up to another NASCAR event, this time in High Point, North Carolina. Again, he was declined the opportunity to compete for the same reason. For this reason, he decided to stop trying to run NASCAR, for the time being at least, instead racing the Dixie Circuit at non-NASCAR speedways, winning his first race not even 2 weeks after starting his racing career, racing up to 5 events per week, the vast majority on Virginia racetracks. Sadly, some prejudiced drivers would wreck him deliberately. Some of the drivers who had built up respect for Scott would serve as his bodyguards at races with some of the racist fans. The 1953 season began with Scott winning a feature race at Staunton, Virginia, also tying the qualifying record at Waynesboro, Virginia, as well as winning the feature event there also. Scott towed his race car to another NASCAR event, this time in Richmond Speedway, and asked Mike Poston to grant him a NASCAR license. Poston, in fact, did grant him a NASCAR license, making Wendell Scott the first African American in the short history of NASCAR. Over the next several seasons, Scott won dozens of races throughout his stay at the regional level of competition. By 1959, he found a way to win 2 championships in the same season, winning the Sportsman Championship in the state of Virginia, as well as the Sportsman Class Truck Championship at Southside Speedway. Finally, in 1961, Wendell Scott made the jump up to the NASCAR Grand National, now NASCAR Cup Series, making his Cup Series debut in race 6 of the season at Piedmont Interstate Fairgrounds in Spartanburg, South Carolina, in a field of 18 competitors on a half-mile dirt track. Scott qualified his self-owned number 87 Chevrolet 9th, and after oil pressure issues ended his day early on lap 52, it left him to finish 17th. In 23 starts throughout that first season, Scott made all but one start in his number 34 Chevrolet. His best start was second at Greenville-Pickens Speedway in the fall. His best finish was 7th at Bowman Gray Stadium in the late summer. Overall, in 23 starts, he scored 5 top 10s, finishing 32nd in final NASCAR Cup Series point standings. For the 1962 season, Scott increased the number of starts that he made in the NASCAR Cup Series over the season prior, running about 75% of the schedule, making 41 starts, all but 6 of which were in his number 34 Chevrolet. The remaining 6 starts were in his number 89 Chevrolet. 1962 was the season of firsts for both Scott and NASCAR. Wendell was able to score his first career pole at Savannah Speedway in the summer, as well as his first career top 5 finish in the Cup Series was a 4th at Greenville-Pickens in the spring. This was the first time in NASCAR's relatively short history that an African American both won a pole position and finished inside the top 10 in the final race results. His best start was first at Savannah in the summer, and his best finish was third twice at New Concord Speedway in the spring and Greenville-Pickens Speedway in the summer. Overall, on 41 starts, Scott scored 1 pole, 0 wins, 4 top 5s, and 19 top 10s, finishing 22nd in final NASCAR Cup Series point standings. The 1963 NASCAR Cup Series season would see Wendell Scott continue to increase the overall number of starts he would make throughout a single season, this season making 47 out of 55 possible starts. All 47 starts were made in the self-owned number 34 Chevrolet. 1963 wasn't as strong of a season as 62, though since he made more starts, he scored more points, allowing him to finish higher in championship point standings. Scott's best start was 5th at Augusta Speedway in the spring. His best finish was 5th at Piedmont State Fairgrounds in the spring. Overall, in 47 starts, he scored 1 top 5 and 15 top 10s, finishing 15th in final NASCAR Cup Series point standings. The following season, in 1964, something happened the NASCAR officials really weren't prepared for. Piloting a Chevy Bel Air that he purchased from Ned Jarrett, Wendell Scott became the first African American to win a NASCAR Cup Series race. With 25 laps to go, Scott passed Richard Petty, who was having some car issues, leading the rest of the event at Speedway Park in Jacksonville, Florida. Sadly, Scott was not initially named the winner of the race, but rather the second-place finisher, Buck Baker, was named the winner of the event at first. Again, in a prejudiced South at the time, the winner celebrated in Victory Lane, and this typically included sharing a kiss with a beauty queen, who was almost always white back then. Some officials and some of the track promoters did not want to see this happen. Most believe this to be the reason for the so-called scoring error. In an era before electronic scoring, handwritten scorecards were prone to human error, or as most suspected in this case, outright cheating. When Scott and his crew protested, officials conducted a review of the scorecards. It took them almost 2 hours to admit their so-called mistake. By this time, the crowd of spectators had dispersed, and Baker had already left with the winner's trophy. Scott was awarded the prize money. He never received the original trophy, though. In August 2021, almost 58 years after the race, and 31 years following Scott's death, NASCAR presented his family with a replica trophy. Making 56 out of the possible 62 starts, his best start was 5th twice at Valdosta 75 Speedway in the summer and Savannah Speedway in the fall. His best finish was 1st at Jacksonville in the winter of 1963. Overall, in 56 starts, Scott scored 1 win, 8 top 5s, and 25 top 10s, finishing 12th in final NASCAR Cup Series point standings. Wendell Scott remained competitive in 1965, behind the wheel of the self-owned number 34 Ford Galaxy. With the experience that he had gained over the previous several seasons, Scott's talent behind the wheel only continued to increase, only finishing lower than 20th 8 times throughout the 52-race season. Just shows how great he was. All this in equipment that was not top of the line. Scott's best start was 5th at Nashville Fairgrounds in the early summer, and his best finish was 4th twice at Nashville Fairgrounds in the early summer and Piedmont Interstate Fairgrounds in the late summer. Overall, in 52 starts, he scored 4 top 5s and 21 top 10s, finishing 11th in final NASCAR Cup Series point standings. Achieving another first in 1966, Scott and his family-owned and run number 34 Ford race team finished inside the top 10 in final point standings. This was the first time an African American would achieve this feat, making 45 out of a possible 49 starts throughout the season, all but 2 behind the wheel of his number 34 Ford. The other 2 were made in the number 25 that Scott owned and the number 59 for Tom Pistone. Scott's best start was 8th at Orange Speedway in the fall, and his best finish was 3rd at Starlight Speedway in the spring. Overall, in 45 starts, he scored 3 top 5s and 17 top 10s, finishing 6th in final NASCAR Cup Series point standings. Things continued to fare all right for Wendell Scott and his family-run race team, putting up another solid performance in 1967, leading him to finish inside the top 10 in final points for the second season in a row. His best start was 8th, 4 times, both races at Beltsville, Bowman Gray Stadium, and Richmond Fairgrounds in the spring. His best finish was 6th, 4 times, at Columbia, Savannah, and Langley Field Speedway in the spring, and then Richmond in the fall. Overall, in 45 starts, he scored 11 top 10s, finishing 10th in final NASCAR Cup Series point standings. After years of running the majority of the schedule, in 1968, Scott made all but one start throughout the entire season, making 48 out of 49 starts with a little help from Roy Tyner, Henley Gray, and G.C. Spencer. They each let Scott make one start apiece in their race cars during the season. Otherwise, he made all the remaining 45 starts in his family-owned and operated number 34 Ford. Scott's best start was 10th at Richmond in the spring. His best finish was 8th 6 times. At both Greensville-Pickens races, Augusta in the spring, Fonda Speedway in the summer, Columbia and Bowman Gray Stadium in the late summer. Overall, in 48 starts, Scott scored 10 top 10s, finishing 9th in final NASCAR Cup Series point standings. Wendell Scott had his most successful season of his career financially in 1969, amassing $47,451 in prize money, making 51 out of 54 possible starts. Scott's best start was 10th at Columbia in the spring, and his best finish was 6th at North Carolina State Fairgrounds in the summer. 1969 was also the final season Scott would finish inside the top 10 in final point standings. Overall, in 51 starts, he scored 11 top 10s, finishing 9th in final NASCAR Cup Series point standings. As the sport ushered in a brand new decade, the 1970s, in 1970, Wendell Scott began the season driving his self-owned number 34 Ford Torino for the first 14 starts of the season that he would make, before George Wiltshire would be listed as owner of his number 34 race car at Riverside International Raceway. After another 6 starts, Scott would make 2 starts for Earl Brooks, followed by 10 starts at a number 34 Plymouth owned by Don Robertson. This was the first time Wendell made more than a one-off start in someone else's race car in back-to-back races. Scott's best start was 9th at Savannah in the spring, and his best finish was 6th at Kingsport Speedway in the summer. Overall, in 41 starts, he scored 9 top 10s, finishing 14th in final NASCAR Cup Series point standings. The final season that Wendell Scott ran the majority of the NASCAR Cup Series schedule was in 1971, behind the wheel of his self-owned number 34 Ford Torino, with the exception of 3 starts. 1 start each in a race car owned by Tom Garn, Eddie Yarborough, and H.B. Cunningham. Scott's best start was 6th at New Asheville Speedway in the spring, and his best finish was 6th at Kingsport Speedway in the spring also. Overall, in 37 starts, he scored 4 top 10s, finishing 19th in final NASCAR Cup Series point standings. With R.J. Reynolds becoming the sponsor of the Cup Series in 1972, they cut a lot of the short tracks off the schedule. This was Scott's best tracks. He attempted 13 NASCAR Cup Series races in 72, only qualifying 6 times. Scott's best start was 11th at Charlotte in the spring, and his best finish was 16th twice at Martinsville in the spring and Dover in the fall. Overall, in 6 Cup Series starts, he scored 4 top 20s. Scott also would run the majority of the season in the Grand National East Series, a regional series formed to fill dates for the tracks who lost their Cup Series dates after the schedule was shortened prior to the 1972 season. Making 12 out of 15 possible starts behind the wheel of a self-owned and operated number 34 Ford. His best start was 12th twice at Jacksonville and Maryville in the spring, and his best finish was 4th at Jacksonville in the spring. Overall, in 12 starts, Scott scored 1 top 5 and 5 top 10s, finishing 7th in final Grand National East Series point standings. The 1973 season would end up being Scott's final season as an active driver. This due to some severe injuries he suffered at Talladega in a lap 8 accident in the spring, including a shattered pelvis, 3 broken ribs, a broken leg in 7 places, and a cut on his arm that required 60 stitches. Prior to the accident, Scott made 2 Cup Series starts and 2 Grand National East Series starts. His best start was 39th, and his best finish was 14th, both coming at Darlington in the spring in the Cup Series. In the Grand National East Series, Scott's best start was 18th, and his best finish was 11th, both coming at Columbia in the spring. Wendell Scott's final NASCAR Cup Series start came at Charlotte in the fall of 1973, behind the wheel of Doc Faustina's number 5 Dodge, starting 38th and finishing 12th. Wendell would pass away in 1990 due to spinal cancer. He was inducted into the NASCAR Hall of Fame in 2015. So, in 495 NASCAR Cup Series starts, Wendell Scott scored 1 pole, 1 win, 20 top 5s, and 147 top 10s, with the best points finish of 6th in 1966. In 14 Grand National East Series starts, Scott scored 1 top 5 and 5 top 10s, with the best points finish of 7th in 1972. Thanks for watching, everyone. Take care.